My parents are sitting across from me at their dining room table, and my mother just slid a handwritten invoice demanding $47,000 for my sister's wedding. The same parents who told me they were broke when I needed $24,000 for emergency surgery 18 months ago. I'm staring at this piece of paper while still making monthly payments on medical debt that nearly destroyed my financial future. My sister Grace is beaming, like this is completely normal, and my father Donald is nodding like I should be grateful for the opportunity to bankrupt myself for her dream day. The hypocrisy is so thick I can barely breathe. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. 18 months ago, I was 26 years old, working as a junior software developer in Denver, making $42,000 a year. I had finally landed my first real tech job after years of freelancing and barely scraping by. Life was looking up until that Tuesday night when the worst pain I had ever experienced tore through my abdomen like someone was stabbing me with a red-hot knife. I drove myself to the emergency room at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital, doubled over, and sweating through my shirt. The triage nurse took one look at me and rushed me straight back. Within 2 hours, I was being wheeled into surgery for an emergency appendectomy. What should have been a routine procedure turned into a 3-day nightmare when complications arose during the operation. The appendix had burst before they could remove it, spilling infection throughout my abdominal cavity. I developed peritonitis, which meant additional surgery to clean out the infection, plus a week-long hospital stay with round-the-clock antibiotics through an IV. Every day brought new medical professionals, new procedures, and new charges I could not afford. When the billing department finally handed me the total, I nearly passed out again. $24,367. My insurance covered barely half, leaving me responsible for $12,200 up front, plus monthly payments on the remainder that would stretch for years. I called my parents from the hospital bed, still groggy from pain medication, but desperate for help. My mother, Patricia, answered on the second ring, her voice filled with concern, until I explained the financial situation. The concern evaporated instantly. "Oh, honey, we would love to help, but we're financially strapped right now," she said, her tone shifting to that practiced sympathy voice she used when declining requests. "The landscaping business has been struggling, and we've had so many unexpected expenses this year." My father Donald got on the phone next, and his approach was entirely different. No fake sympathy, just cold lectures about personal responsibility. "Son, you're 26 years old. You need to handle your own medical bills. We can't be bailing you out every time life throws you a curveball. This is part of being an adult." I tried explaining that this was not some frivolous expense or poor financial planning. This was an emergency that could have killed me. Donald remained unmoved. "You chose to live in an expensive city. You chose a job that doesn't pay enough for emergencies. These are consequences of your decisions." The conversation ended with them wishing me well and suggesting I look into payment plans or financial assistance programs. I hung up feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life, lying in a hospital bed with a belly full of stitches and a future full of crushing debt. I spent the next 6 months drowning in medical payments that consumed 30% of my take-home pay. Every month, I sent nearly $800 to various medical billing companies. I ate ramen noodles for dinner, canceled streaming services, and walked everywhere to save on gas. My social life disappeared because I could not afford to go out with friends or coworkers. The financial stress was crushing my spirit and my health. I was losing weight, sleeping poorly, and constantly anxious about money. My job performance started suffering because I could not concentrate on coding when I was calculating whether I could afford groceries that week. Then, 6 months after my surgery, my neighbor Marcus mentioned something that changed everything. He was washing his car in the driveway when he casually said, "Hey, your parents got a sweet new BMW. I saw your dad driving it when I was down in the Springs last weekend. Must be nice to be able to afford that kind of luxury." My blood turned to ice water. A new BMW. While I was eating 99-cent frozen dinners and taking the bus to work because my car payment was too expensive. I called my younger brother Tyler that same evening, trying to keep my voice casual. Tyler was 22, finishing his senior year at Colorado State University. He had always been more willing to share family information than Grace, who worshipped our parents and never questioned their decisions. "Oh yeah, they got the BMW about 4 months ago," Tyler confirmed. "Dad said they got a great deal on it. Plus they're redoing the kitchen. Mom's been showing off the granite countertops to everyone who visits." My hands were shaking as I pressed for more details. How are they affording all this? I thought business was struggling. Tyler was quiet for a moment, then spoke in a lower voice. "Dude, I probably should not tell you this, but they took out a home equity loan. $60,000. They got it approved like 2 weeks before your surgery happened." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. 2 weeks before my surgery, they had $60,000 in available credit. They chose to let me drown in medical debt rather than help their own son during a life-threatening emergency. They lied directly to my face about being financially strapped while they were literally planning luxury purchases. "Tyler, did they tell you not to mention this to me?" Another pause. "Yeah, Mom specifically said not to talk about their financial stuff with you. She said you might get the wrong idea and think they owed you something." I spent that night staring at the ceiling, processing the depth of their deception. It was not just that they had chosen not to help me. They had actively concealed their ability to help while I suffered. They had watched me struggle for months, knowing they could solve my problem with a single phone call to their bank. The worst part was realizing they felt justified in their decision. They had discussed it, planned it, and decided that teaching me a lesson about independence was more important than preventing my financial ruin during a medical emergency. Fast forward 1 year and my life had finally started stabilizing. I had received 2 promotions at work, bringing my salary up to $58,000 annually. The medical debt was still hanging over me like a dark cloud, but the monthly payments were no longer threatening my basic survival. I had even started dating again and managed to save up a small emergency fund. That's when Grace called with her big news. She was engaged to Bradley, a real estate agent whose family owned several rental properties in Aspen. Grace was 25, 3 years younger than me, and had lived a completely different life than Tyler and me. While Tyler and I had worked part-time jobs throughout high school and college, Grace had focused on her studies and social life. After graduating with a degree in communications, she landed a part-time job at an upscale boutique clothing store in downtown Colorado Springs. The job was more hobby than career, providing spending money, while she continued living in the converted guest house behind our parents' main residence. Grace had never paid rent, utilities, or grocery bills. She drove a car our parents purchased and maintained. Her life was essentially subsidized childhood extending into her mid-20s, which she saw as evidence of our parents' love rather than financial dependence. Bradley seemed like a decent enough guy, though I had only met him twice at family gatherings. He was 28, clean-cut, and polite. His family's real estate investments had given him financial stability, which probably appealed to Grace's comfortable lifestyle expectations. The engagement announcement came with an invitation to Sunday dinner at our parents' house, where Grace promised to share all the exciting wedding details. I should have known something was wrong when Tyler texted me beforehand saying, "Prepare yourself for some serious family drama tonight." I arrived at their 4-bedroom suburban home in Colorado Springs, noting the new landscaping and freshly painted exterior. The BMW was parked prominently in the driveway next to Patricia's newer Lexus SUV. The contrast with my own modest apartment and aging Honda Civic was not lost on me. Grace greeted me at the door with an enthusiasm that seemed forced. She was practically bouncing with excitement, clutching a thick folder against her chest. "Zane, I'm so glad you're here. Wait until you see everything I've planned." Dinner conversation was dominated by wedding talk. Grace had chosen the Broadmoor Resort as her venue, a 5-star luxury destination that charged premium rates for everything from ceremonies to catering. Her dress was being custom designed by a boutique in Denver that specialized in exclusive bridal wear. The guest list included 200 people, requiring extensive catering, photography, videography, and entertainment. Donald and Patricia listened to every detail with pride and approval, asking questions about flower arrangements and wine selections. There was no mention of cost or budget constraints. They discussed this $94,000 celebration like other families might plan a backyard barbecue. After dessert, Grace opened her folder and spread papers across the dining room table. I've been working on the budget for months, and I want everyone to understand their contribution expectations. She handed each of us a printed sheet with our names at the top and detailed financial breakdowns below. My sheet showed an expected contribution of $47,000 listed as Older Brother Support, Professional Income Tier. Tyler's sheet requested $8,000 labeled College Student Rate, adjusted for financial status. Donald and Patricia's contributions totaled the remaining $39,000 split between venue deposits and vendor payments. I calculated everyone's contribution based on their ability to pay and their relationship importance. Grace explained as if this was a completely reasonable approach to wedding planning. Zane makes good money in tech now, so he should be able to handle the larger share. Tyler's still in college, so his amount is much smaller. I stared at the paper, reading and rereading the numbers. $47,000. Nearly my entire annual salary after taxes. More than double what they had refused to contribute for my life-saving surgery. Grace, this is almost $50,000. I'm still paying off medical debt from my appendix surgery. There's no way I can afford this. Her expression shifted from excitement to disappointment to something approaching anger. Zane, this is my wedding. This is the most important day of my life. I've dreamed about this since I was little, and I've planned every detail perfectly. Patricia joined in immediately. Grace has been looking forward to this for years, honey. Surely you want to support your sister's happiness. Donald leaned back in his chair, studying my reaction. It's a significant amount, but you're doing well in your career now. Family comes first, son. This is when we all pull together. I looked around the table at their expectant faces, realizing they genuinely expected me to agree to this financial suicide mission. You're asking me for more money than you refused to lend me when I was facing a medical emergency that could have killed me. Grace's eyes filled with tears. That's completely different. That was medical bills. This is a celebration of love and family unity. How is that different? They're both family financial needs. Because my wedding is about bringing our family together, creating beautiful memories, and starting my new life with Bradley. Your surgery was just paying bills. The casual dismissal of my life-threatening emergency as just paying bills hit me like a slap. Before I could respond, Grace continued with information that made my blood run cold. Besides, I've been saving for this wedding for 2 years now. Mom and Dad have been helping me put money aside every month so I could have the wedding of my dreams. I've been getting $1,500 monthly to build my wedding fund. Tyler nearly choked on his water. I stared at Grace, processing what she had just revealed. You've been receiving $1,500 a month from our parents for 2 years. Yes, they started helping me save when I turned 23. They said every girl deserves to have her dream wedding, and they wanted to make sure I could afford everything I wanted. $36,000. Over the past 2 years, while I was eating ramen noodles and walking to work to save gas money, our parents had given Grace $36,000 for wedding expenses. They had the resources to completely cover my medical emergency and chose instead to subsidize Grace's luxury wedding preparations. Tyler looked sick. He set down his fork and stared at his own contribution sheet. Grace, did you know about the home equity loan when Zane was in the hospital? Grace glanced at our parents nervously. What home equity loan? The $60,000 loan they took out 2 weeks before his surgery. The loan they used to buy the BMW and renovate the kitchen. Grace's cheeks flushed pink. That's not really any of my business. That was their financial decision. Tyler leaned forward, his voice getting stronger. Did you know they had $60,000 available when Zane was begging for help with his medical bills? Tyler, stop, Patricia warned sharply. But Tyler was beyond stopping. She knew. Didn't she? Grace knew they could help Zane, and she said nothing because she wanted the money saved for this wedding. Grace burst into tears, but they looked more like tears of frustration than sadness. That money wasn't for medical bills. It was for home improvements and family investments. I can't help it if Zane didn't plan better for emergencies. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Grace had known our parents could afford to help me. She had participated in family discussions where they decided not to help their son during a medical emergency because preserving money for her wedding was more important than preventing my financial ruin. I stood up from the table, my hands trembling with rage. You all sat here and planned this. You made a conscious decision to let me suffer financially while you saved money for a party. Donald slammed his hand on the table. That's enough. We don't owe you explanations for our financial decisions. You're an adult, and adults handle their own problems. But Grace isn't an adult. She gets monthly allowances and family-funded celebrations. Patricia's voice turned cold. Grace is getting married. This is a family milestone that we all should celebrate and support. Your medical situation was temporary, but marriage is forever. I looked at these people who had raised me, wondering when they had become strangers. My medical situation was life-threatening. Marriage is a choice to throw a party. Grace stood up, sobbing dramatically. How can you say that this is the most important day of my life? And staying alive was pretty important to me. The room erupted in shouting, with Donald defending Grace's wedding as a family priority, and Patricia accusing me of being bitter and selfish. Grace continued crying, while Bradley sat silently, looking increasingly uncomfortable with the family dynamics he was witnessing. Only Tyler remained quiet, staring at his contribution sheet like he was seeing his family clearly for the first time. The shouting match lasted another 20 minutes before everyone exhausted themselves into cold silence. Grace sat sniffling into tissues while Bradley rubbed her shoulders awkwardly. Donald and Patricia wore expressions of righteous indignation, as if I was the unreasonable one for questioning their financial priorities. I tried one more time to make them understand the fundamentals of what they were asking. Let me break this down in simple terms. You want me to contribute $47,000 to a wedding celebration. That's nearly my entire annual take-home pay. I'm still paying $800 monthly on medical debt from emergency surgery you refused to help with despite having $60,000 in available credit at the time. Donald leaned forward, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used when he thought he was teaching life lessons. Zane, life is about priorities. Grace's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime celebration that will create memories for our entire family. Your medical situation was a temporary financial inconvenience that you handled successfully on your own. Temporary financial inconvenience, I nearly died. Patricia jumped in with her practiced, sweet voice that somehow made everything sound worse. Sweetheart, we know the surgery was scary, but you recovered completely. You're healthy and successful now. Grace's wedding is happening once and we'll never get another chance to make it perfect for her. I turned to Grace, hoping to find some recognition of the insanity in what they were proposing. Grace, do you honestly think it's fair to ask me for more money than our parents refused to lend me during a life-threatening emergency? Grace wiped her eyes and looked at me with genuine confusion. Zane, I don't understand why you keep bringing up your surgery. That was a medical problem that you solved by setting up payment plans. My wedding is a celebration that requires family support to make it beautiful and memorable. I solved it by going into crushing debt that I'm still paying off. But you did solve it, Grace continued, as if this proved her point. You figured out how to handle the bills and everything worked out fine. My wedding only happens once, and if family doesn't support it, I'll never get another chance to have the celebration I've dreamed about. Bradley finally spoke up, his voice uncertain. Maybe we could scale back some of the expenses. The venue and catering costs seem pretty high. Grace whirled on him like he had suggested canceling the wedding entirely. Bradley, we've been through this. The Broadmoor is perfect, and the catering package includes everything we want. I'm not compromising on the most important day of my life because people don't want to support our happiness. Bradley backed down immediately, clearly unprepared for the intensity of Grace's reaction. Tyler caught my eye and shook his head slightly, a gesture that said he was recognizing family patterns he had never noticed before. I tried a different approach, appealing to basic logic and fairness. What if I had died during that surgery? Would you all be sitting here planning how to divide the wedding costs differently? Patricia gasped dramatically. Zane. What a horrible thing to say. Of course we would have been devastated if anything had happened to you, but not devastated enough to help when I was actually in danger. Donald stood up abruptly, his patience clearly exhausted. That's it. I'm done with this victim mentality, Zane. You're 28 years old, you have a good job, and you handled your medical situation like an adult. Now your sister needs family support for her wedding, and you're being selfish and ungrateful. I'm being realistic about my finances. You're being bitter. Patricia added, her sweet voice finally cracking to reveal the sharp edge underneath. Ever since your surgery, you've been resentful and negative. We've tried to be patient with your attitude, but this is Grace's time to be celebrated. Grace nodded enthusiastically through her tears. Exactly. This should be a happy time for our family, and you're making it all about yourself and something that happened over a year ago. I stared at them in disbelief. They were rewriting history in real time, transforming my legitimate financial concerns into emotional character flaws. My medical emergency had become something that happened over a year ago, rather than an ongoing financial burden they had chosen not to help with. Donald delivered what he clearly intended as the final word. Here's what's going to happen, son. You're going to contribute to your sister's wedding like a good brother should. You're going to apologize for your ungrateful attitude and this emotional outburst, and you're going to be happy for Grace like the rest of the family. And if I don't... The silence that followed was loaded with threat. Patricia and Donald exchanged a look that communicated volumes. Grace stopped crying, suddenly alert to the power dynamics playing out. Donald's voice dropped to a cold, measured tone. If you don't, then you'll face the consequences of your selfishness. We've been telling family members about your attitude for months now, Zane. About how bitter and resentful you've become. About how you expect handouts and then complain when family asks for support. My stomach dropped. What do you mean telling family members? Patricia picked up the thread smoothly. We've had to explain to Grandma Eleanor and Uncle Robert and Aunt Sarah why you've been so distant lately. Why you don't come to family gatherings anymore. Why you seem angry all the time. I don't come to family gatherings because I wasn't invited to most of them. You weren't invited because we knew you'd bring this negative energy and ruin everyone's good time, Donald replied matter-of-factly. We've been protecting the family from your attitude while hoping you'd work through your issues on your own. Grace was nodding along like this all made perfect sense. Everyone's been asking about you, wondering why you're so antisocial now. Mom and Dad have been making excuses, but people are starting to think you just don't care about family anymore. Tyler looked horrified. What kind of excuses? Patricia turned to Tyler with that same sweet voice. We've been telling people that Zane is going through a difficult phase dealing with pride issues after expecting help with his medical bills. That he's having trouble accepting that adults need to handle their own problems. The character assassination was breathtaking in its scope and calculation. For over a year, they had been systematically destroying my reputation with extended family members portraying me as ungrateful and selfish while hiding their own financial deception. Donald leaned back in his chair, confident he held all the cards. So, here's your choice, Zane. You can contribute to Grace's wedding, apologize for tonight's behavior, and start acting like a grateful member of this family again. Or you can continue down this path of selfishness and face complete estrangement from everyone who matters. What does that mean exactly? It means we've already spoken with our attorney about updating our will and inheritance documents. It means family invitations will stop coming. It means when people ask about you, we'll tell them the truth about your character. It means you'll be choosing to make yourself an outsider. Grace was watching this ultimatum with fascination rather than horror, clearly viewing it as appropriate consequences for my refusal to fund her wedding. Bradley looked increasingly uncomfortable, but said nothing. Tyler broke the silence with a question that surprised everyone. "Mom, Dad, what happens if I can't afford the $8,000 you're asking for?" Patricia immediately softened her voice. "Oh, honey, you're still in college. We understand that your budget is tight. We can work out a payment plan or reduce your contribution if necessary." But Zane doesn't get that same consideration. Donald's expression hardened again. "Tyler, you're still young and learning about responsibility. Zane is a successful professional who can afford to support his family, but chooses not to." I looked at my younger brother and saw something I had never seen before. Tyler was questioning our parents' logic and finding it wanting. The golden child was recognizing the double standards that had shaped our family dynamics for years. "I need time to think about this," I said finally, knowing I had no intention of agreeing to their demands, but needing to escape the toxic atmosphere. Donald nodded curtly. "You have until next Sunday dinner. 1 week to decide whether you're part of this family or not." I left their house that night feeling like I was living in an alternate reality where medical emergencies were selfish inconveniences and luxury weddings were family obligations. The drive back to Denver gave me time to process the full scope of what had just happened. My parents had not just refused to help me during a medical crisis. They had actively planned the refusal while secretly funding my sister's wedding preparations. They had spent over a year destroying my reputation with extended family members, and now they were threatening complete estrangement unless I bankrupted myself for Grace's celebration. The most chilling part was how confident they seemed about their position. They genuinely believed they held moral high ground and that I would eventually cave to their demands rather than face family rejection. They had seriously underestimated both my financial limitations and my willingness to tolerate manipulation. I spent Monday morning at work unable to concentrate on code replaying the dinner conversation and trying to figure out my next steps. The ultimatum deadline was looming, but more than that, I was haunted by the revelation that my parents had been systematically destroying my reputation with extended family for over a year. Tuesday evening, Tyler called me with urgency in his voice. "Zane, can you meet me tonight? I'm driving up to Denver. There's stuff you need to know and I can't talk about it over the phone." We met at a 24-hour diner near my apartment, and Tyler looked like he had not slept since Sunday dinner. He was carrying a backpack that seemed unusually heavy, and his eyes kept darting around the restaurant like he was expecting surveillance. "I've been thinking about everything that happened Sunday night, and I realized some things that are going to blow your mind." He began, keeping his voice low. "I've been documenting stuff for months because I was worried about my own future with this family." He pulled out his phone and showed me a recording app. "I've been recording family conversations since last Christmas, when I started noticing the financial inconsistencies and the way they talked about you when you weren't around." My blood pressure spiked. "Tyler, what kind of conversations?" "Let me start with the financial stuff because that's the most concrete evidence." He opened his backpack and pulled out a manila folder. "I've been photographing bank statements and loan documents that they leave around the house. Look at this." The first document was a bank statement showing the home equity loan deposit, $60,000, dated 2 weeks before my surgery. The second was a series of transfers from that account to various spending categories, including $15,000 to Grace's savings account just 1 month after my surgery. "Tyler, where did you get these?" "Dad leaves banking stuff on his desk in the home office. I started photographing it after I realized they were lying to you about not having money for your surgery. But look at this breakdown." He spread out several more documents showing how they had allocated the home equity funds. $15,000 for the BMW down payment, $12,000 for kitchen renovations, $8,000 for new landscaping, $10,000 into a family investment account, and $15,000 directly to Grace's wedding fund. "They designated money for Grace's wedding 1 month after your surgery," Tyler explained. "While you were setting up payment plans and eating ramen, they were literally moving money into her wedding account." The betrayal was even deeper than I had realized. They had not just refused to help me, They had actively chosen to prioritize Grace's future celebration over my immediate medical crisis. But wait, there's more. Tyler continued, pulling out his phone again. I've got audio recordings of them discussing strategy about how to handle you. He played the first recording captured at the kitchen table while they thought Tyler was studying upstairs. Patricia's voice came through clearly. We need to make sure Zane understands that family hierarchy means supporting Grace's important milestones. His medical situation was temporary, but marriage is a lifetime commitment. Donald's response chilled me. The boy needs to learn that family obligations work both ways. He can't expect help when he's in trouble and then refuse to contribute when family needs support. Teaching him this lesson now will benefit him in the long run. Grace's voice joined the conversation. I just think it's selfish of him to hold grudges about medical bills when this is about celebrating love and family unity. He handled the surgery fine on his own, so obviously he didn't really need help anyway. Tyler paused the recording. There are hours of this stuff, Zane. They've been planning how to manipulate you for months. The next recording was even more damaging. Grace was clearly leading a conversation about financial strategies. I told Bradley that family support for weddings is normal and expected. His family is contributing $30,000, so our family needs to match that level of commitment to show we're equals. Patricia responded. Grace is right. The wedding reflects on our entire family's status. Zane's contribution needs to be substantial enough to demonstrate that we support Grace properly. Donald added, if Zane refuses, we'll have to consider whether he's really committed to being part of this family long term. The inheritance and family business connections depend on loyalty and mutual support. Tyler stopped the recording and looked at me gravely. They've been planning to cut you out financially if you don't pay for Grace's wedding. It's not just threats, Zane. They've actually discussed it with their attorney. I was reeling from the calculated nature of their manipulation. But Tyler was not finished with his revelations. Now, here's the part that's going to really upset you, he said, pulling out more documents. Remember how Grace has been getting $1,500 monthly for 2 years? I found the account records that show where some of that money came from. He handed me a series of bank transfers that made my vision blur with rage. Starting 3 months after my surgery, there were regular transfers from an account labeled Family Medical Emergency Fund into Grace's wedding savings account. They had a medical emergency fund, Zane. $30,000 that was specifically designated for family medical crises. Instead of using it for your surgery, they transferred it to Grace's wedding fund over the course of 18 months. The room was spinning. They had not just refused to help me, they had taken money that was specifically intended for medical emergencies and given it to Grace for wedding expenses. Money that could have covered my entire surgery cost had been systematically diverted to fund her luxury celebration. There's more, Tyler continued relentlessly. I recorded them discussing how to handle extended family questions about your absence from gatherings. The next audio clip featured Patricia's voice. If Eleanor asks about Zane again, tell her he's been going through a difficult period since his surgery, that he's developed some unrealistic expectations about family financial support and needs time to work through his pride issues. Donald's voice. Make sure she understands that we tried to help him develop realistic expectations about adult responsibilities, but he's been resistant to learning financial independence. Grace. Just emphasize that he's become really negative and bitter since the surgery, that family gatherings are more pleasant without that energy bringing everyone down. Tyler turned off the recording. They've been character assassinating you to Grandma Eleanor, Uncle Robert, Aunt Sarah, and basically everyone in the extended family. But here's the thing that made me start documenting everything. I realized they're setting me up for the same treatment if I don't conform to their expectations. He showed me one final recording that explained his motivation for gathering evidence. Patricia and Donald were discussing Tyler's future after college. We need to make sure Tyler learns from Zane's mistakes. If he shows the same entitled attitude about family support, we'll have to apply the same boundaries. Donald, the inheritance structure will reward loyalty and family commitment. Both boys need to understand that family resources come with family obligations. Tyler looked exhausted. I started recording because I realized that my future financial security depends on staying in their good graces. But after seeing what they did to you, I can't stay silent anymore. I stared at my younger brother, understanding that he was taking enormous personal risks to help me. Tyler, if they find out you're helping me, they'll cut you off financially too. I know, but I can't watch them destroy you and then pretend everything is normal. Besides, I've been thinking about this for months, and I realize something important. If they can treat you this way during a medical emergency, what happens when I face my own crisis someday? Tyler was right. Our parents had revealed their true character through their response to my emergency. Their love and support were conditional on compliance with their financial demands and social expectations. Anyone who challenged their authority or failed to meet their standards would face the same systematic destruction I was experiencing. "What do you think we should do?" I asked. Tyler leaned forward, his voice filled with determination I had never heard before. "I think we need to show the extended family what's really been going on. Grandma Eleanor, Uncle Robert, Aunt Sarah, they all deserve to know why you've been absent from family events. They deserve to know they've been lied to about your character." He was right, but I was terrified of the potential consequences. "Tyler, if we do this, there's no going back. They'll never forgive us for exposing their lies. Zane, they're never going to treat us fairly anyway. At least this way, the people who actually care about us will know the truth." I looked at my brother, realizing he had grown up considerably over the past few months. His willingness to risk his own financial security to help me was the most genuine family loyalty I had experienced since my surgery. "Okay," I said finally. "Let's show them the evidence. But we do this together, and we do this carefully." Tyler nodded grimly. "I've already made copies of everything. Multiple copies stored in different places. If they try to retaliate by claiming we forged documents or made up recordings, we'll have proof that everything is authentic." For the first time since Sunday dinner, I felt like I had allies in this fight. Tyler's evidence would expose not just their financial deception, but their systematic campaign to isolate me from family support. The truth would finally come to light, even if the consequences tore our family apart permanently. Tyler and I spent Wednesday evening developing our strategy for contacting extended family members. We decided to start with Grandma Eleanor because she was the family matriarch and had always been fair in her dealings with everyone. If we could get her to understand the situation, she might help us approach other relatives. Thursday morning, I called Eleanor from my office during lunch break. She was 82 years old, sharp as ever, and had always treated me with genuine affection. Her voice brightened when she heard from me. "Zane, how wonderful to hear your voice. I was just thinking about you yesterday. How are you doing, sweetheart?" The warmth in her greeting made my throat tight with emotion. "I'm doing okay, Grandma, but I need to tell you some things that might be hard to hear, about why I haven't been around much lately." Her tone immediately shifted to concern. "Oh, honey, your parents mentioned you've been going through a difficult time since your surgery. They said you needed some space to work through things." "Grandma, what exactly did they tell you about my surgery and the time since then?" Eleanor paused, choosing her words carefully. "They said you had medical bills that were stressing you out, and that you had developed some unrealistic expectations about family financial help. Patricia mentioned that you were struggling with pride issues, and had become rather bitter about having to handle the bills on your own." My hands were trembling as I realized the extent of their character assassination. "Grandma, can I come visit you this Saturday? I have some documents and recordings I need to share with you. The story you've been told isn't true." Saturday afternoon, Tyler and I drove down to Eleanor's apartment in a senior community near Colorado Springs. She lived independently in a beautiful 2-bedroom unit filled with family photos and handmade quilts. She welcomed us with homemade cookies and genuine concern for whatever was troubling us. "Now then," she said, settling into her favorite armchair, "tell me what's really been happening." I started with the basic timeline: my emergency surgery, the $24,000 medical bill, my parents' refusal to help, despite having $60,000 in available credit from a home equity loan. Eleanor's expression grew increasingly troubled as I explained the financial details. When I told her about Grace's monthly $1,500 allowances and the $94,000 wedding budget, Eleanor's mouth fell open in shock. "You're telling me that Donald and Patricia refused to help with your emergency medical bills, but have been giving Grace $18,000 annually for wedding preparations. Senu." Tyler pulled out his documentation and played selected audio recordings. Eleanor listened with growing horror to her own son and daughter-in-law discussing strategies for manipulating me and destroying my reputation with family members. When the recordings finished, Eleanor sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Finally, she spoke in a voice I had never heard from her before, cold, disappointed, and angry. "Those recordings are of my son discussing how to psychologically manipulate his own child and lie to his family about that child's character." She stood up abruptly and walked to her kitchen, returning with a manila folder of her own. "Zane, there's something I need to tell you, and I'm ashamed that I didn't realize the connection before now." Eleanor opened the folder and pulled out several bank statements and canceled checks. "6 months ago, your father called me in tears saying the landscaping business was struggling and he needed help covering unexpected medical expenses for the family. He said you were drowning in medical debt and they were trying to help you, but their own resources were stretched thin." My stomach dropped. "Grandma, what did you do?" "I gave him $8,000 believing it was going to help pay for your surgery bills. I thought the whole family was working together to support you through your medical crisis." Tyler leaned forward urgently. "Eleanor, do you still have the check records showing when you gave them the money?" She handed him the bank statements. "August 15th last year. Donald said it was urgently needed to prevent your medical bills from going to collections." Tyler was already pulling out his phone to check dates. "Grandma, that's exactly 3 weeks after they transferred $15,000 from their medical emergency fund to Grace's wedding account. They took your money under false pretenses." Eleanor's face was pale with fury. "You mean they lied to me about family financial hardship in order to get money that they gave to Grace for wedding expenses?" "That's exactly what happened," I confirmed. "They manipulated you into contributing to Grace's wedding fund by pretending it was for my medical bills." Eleanor stood up and walked to her phone. "I'm calling Robert right now. If they lied to me, they probably lied to other family members too." Uncle Robert arrived within an hour, and his story was even more disturbing. Over the past year, he had loaned Donald and Patricia $12,000 in 3 separate transactions. Each time, Donald had called claiming temporary business cash flow problems and unexpected family medical expenses. Robert showed us his own records: $4,000 in October, $3,000 in January, and $5,000 in March. Donald had specifically mentioned my ongoing medical debt as evidence of family financial strain. Every time I offered to contribute directly to Zane's medical expenses, Donald insisted that family finances should be handled privately, and that my money would be most helpful if given to them for flexible allocation. Robert explained, his voice tight with anger. Tyler was taking notes, calculating the scope of financial manipulation. "So far, that's $20,000 that family members contributed, believing it would help Zane's medical situation, but which actually went to Grace's wedding fund." Eleanor was on the phone with Aunt Sarah, and from the half of the conversation we could hear it was clear that the financial deception extended beyond immediate family. When Eleanor hung up, her expression was grim. "Sarah has been sending monthly support payments for Tyler's college expenses. $200 every month for the past 18 months because Patricia told her you boys needed help with educational costs after Zane's medical crisis strained the family budget." Tyler went white. "I never received any money from Aunt Sarah for college expenses." "Which means they've been collecting money from family members under false pretenses for over a year," Robert concluded. "This isn't just poor financial priorities. This is systematic fraud." The room fell silent as we all processed the full scope of Donald and Patricia's manipulation. They had not just refused to help me during a medical emergency. They had actively used my medical crisis as justification for collecting money from elderly and caring family members, money that they diverted to Grace's wedding expenses. Eleanor was the first to speak, her voice shaking with emotion. "I need to call everyone. Eleanor, Margaret, David, Susan. We need to find out how many family members have been deceived and how much money has been collected under false pretenses. Over the next 2 hours, Eleanor's apartment became the headquarters for a family investigation that revealed the true extent of Donald and Patricia's financial manipulation. Phone calls to aunts, uncles, and family friends uncovered a pattern of deception spanning 18 months. Aunt Margaret had contributed $3,000 for family medical support. Cousin David had sent $1,500 believing it would help with my recovery expenses. Family friend Susan had organized a meal train and collected $2,000 in gift cards thinking I was struggling to afford groceries while paying medical bills. By evening, we had documented over $30,000 that family members had contributed, believing they were helping me recover from my medical emergency. Every penny had been diverted to Grace's wedding preparations, while I struggled alone with crushing medical debt. The emotional impact on the extended family was devastating. These were people who genuinely cared about me and had wanted to help during my crisis. They felt betrayed, not just financially but emotionally, realizing their compassion had been exploited for luxury wedding expenses. Uncle Robert, who practiced family law, reviewed the evidence with professional detachment. This constitutes fraud in multiple categories: obtaining money under false pretenses, elder financial abuse in Eleanor's case, and possibly identity theft if they forged any documents. But the most damaging revelation came from Tyler's final recording, captured just 2 days earlier. Grace was talking to Bradley about family contributions, and her casual comments revealed knowledge that shattered any possibility of claimed innocence. Grace's voice on the recording: "The best part is that everyone thinks they're helping poor Zane with his medical bills, so they're happy to contribute. Uncle Robert even said he was proud of the family for supporting each other through difficult times." Bradley: "Don't you feel bad about taking money people intended for your brother?" Grace: "Why should I feel bad? Zane figured out how to pay his bills on his own, which proves he didn't really need help anyway. This money is going to something beautiful and meaningful that will bring the family together. It's much better than just paying off boring medical debt." The recording confirmed that Grace was not just a passive beneficiary of her parents' fraud. She was an active participant who understood exactly how family members were being deceived and felt justified in the deception because she considered her wedding more important than my medical recovery. Eleanor wept when she heard Grace's casual dismissal of the family's genuine concern and generosity. "That sweet little girl I helped raise. How did she become someone who could manipulate her grandmother's love like this?" By Saturday evening, we had contacted 12 family members and uncovered systematic fraud totaling nearly $35,000. Every person who had contributed money intended to help me was devastated to learn they had funded Grace's luxury wedding instead. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. While we were gathering evidence of financial fraud, Grace's world was starting to collapse from an entirely different direction. Bradley called Tyler that Saturday night with information that explained his increasingly uncomfortable behavior during family gatherings. His parents had been conducting their own investigation into Grace's financial background as part of standard pre-marriage due diligence for a family with substantial real estate holdings. "Tyler, I need to ask you something confidentially," Bradley said during their phone conversation, which Tyler had put on speaker so I could hear. "My family's attorney discovered some irregularities in financial documents Grace provided for our prenuptial agreement preparation. Does your family have any history of financial fraud or identity theft, say?" Tyler and I exchanged glances. "Bradley, what kind of irregularities?" Grace listed Zane as a financial co-guarantor for several wedding vendor contracts, but when our attorney tried to verify his consent and financial information, the signatures didn't match samples from other documents, and Zane's credit report shows inquiries he says he never authorized. My blood turned to ice. "Bradley, I never co-signed anything for Grace's wedding. I never even saw any contracts." "That's what I was afraid you'd say. My family is very concerned about potential criminal activity, and they're insisting on a complete financial audit before the wedding proceeds." Tyler grabbed his notebook and started writing rapidly. "Bradley, this is huge. We need to see those contracts and credit reports immediately. I can't share the documents directly, but I can tell you that Grace appears to have forged Zane's signature on vendor contracts totaling $47,000. The wedding venue caterer and photographer all have contracts listing Zane as financially responsible if primary payments fail. The room was spinning around me. Not only had my parents refused to help with my medical emergency and collected money under false pretenses from family members, but Grace had forged my signature to make me legally liable for her wedding expenses. Bradley, what's your family planning to do with this information? They're meeting with their attorney Monday morning to determine whether to press charges or simply cancel the wedding and end the engagement. They can't risk association with potential criminal activity. Tyler looked at me with a mixture of concern and grim satisfaction. Zane, this means Grace might be facing criminal charges for identity theft and fraud. And it means the wedding is probably going to be canceled regardless of what anyone contributes, I added. Bradley confirmed our assessment. My parents are already talking to wedding vendors about cancellation policies. They want complete separation from any financial or legal liability before this situation gets worse. Saturday night, I went to bed with my head spinning from the scope of discoveries we had made in just one weekend. My family's financial manipulation was far more extensive and criminal than I had imagined. But more importantly, the truth was finally coming to light, and the people who genuinely cared about me were learning how they had been deceived. The wedding Grace had been willing to destroy family relationships to fund was crumbling under the weight of its own fraudulent foundation. Monday morning brought chaos from multiple directions. I was trying to focus on work when Tyler called with urgency that immediately grabbed my attention. Zane, you need to check your credit report right now and then meet me at Eleanor's apartment. Bradley's family shared their attorney's findings with Uncle Robert, and the identity theft situation is much worse than we thought. I pulled my credit report during my lunch break, and the results made my hands shake with rage. 3 unauthorized credit inquiries in the past 6 months, all from wedding vendors. 1 completely unknown credit card account opened in my name 4 months ago with a current balance of $8,700 in charges from florists, photographers, and catering deposits. My personal information had been stolen and used to create financial obligations I knew nothing about. Grace and my parents had not just forged my signature on vendor contracts, they had opened credit accounts in my name to fund wedding preparations. I called Tyler immediately. They opened a credit card in my name. $8,000 in wedding charges that I'm legally responsible for. Get over to Eleanor's place right now. Uncle Robert is here with his attorney friend, and we're documenting everything for potential criminal charges. Eleanor's apartment had been transformed into a legal strategy center. Uncle Robert had brought Marcus Henderson, a criminal attorney who specialized in financial fraud cases. The dining room table was covered with bank records, audio recordings, credit reports, and vendor contracts. Marcus reviewed my credit report with professional detachment. This is textbook identity theft with intent to defraud. Opening accounts in someone's name without consent is a felony. The fact that family members did this makes it elder abuse and domestic financial abuse as well. He showed me photocopies of the vendor contracts Bradley's family had discovered. My forged signature appeared on agreements with the wedding venue catering company photographer and florist. The total financial exposure was $47,300. The signature analysis will be straightforward to prove in court, Marcus explained. But the more serious issue is the pattern of financial fraud involving multiple family members and extended deception. Tyler pulled out his recordings and documentation. We've got audio evidence of them planning the manipulation bank records showing the medical emergency fund diversion and testimony from family members who were defrauded. Marcus listened to selected audio clips and reviewed financial documents with growing amazement. In 30 years of practicing criminal law, I've rarely seen such systematic and calculated family financial abuse. This isn't impulsive behavior. It's organized criminal activity. Eleanor was sitting quietly in her armchair, looking older than I had ever seen her. The woman who had raised 4 children and buried a husband was struggling to process that her own son was capable of such calculated cruelty toward his family. Marcus, what are the potential criminal charges? Robert asked. For Donald and Patricia, identity theft fraud. Elder financial abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud. For Grace, identity theft fraud, conspiracy. The charges carry potential prison sentences ranging from 2 to 10 years depending on the total dollar amounts involved. I looked around the room at the faces of people who genuinely cared about me, realizing that my family crisis had evolved into a legal reckoning that would determine everyone's future. What do you recommend we do? Eleanor asked quietly. Marcus set down the documents and looked at each of us seriously. First, we file police reports immediately to establish official documentation. Second, we contact all the financial institutions to report the identity theft and begin recovery proceedings. Third, we notify the wedding vendors about the fraudulent contracts to protect them from financial loss. And fourth, Tyler asked. Fourth, we give Donald, Patricia, and Grace an opportunity to make full restitution and accept responsibility before criminal charges are filed. Sometimes family financial crimes can be resolved through civil restitution if the perpetrators acknowledge wrongdoing and repay all stolen funds. Eleanor straightened in her chair, her voice regaining some of its usual strength. I want to confront Donald directly about what he's done. He needs to hear from his mother that this behavior is unacceptable and criminal. Robert nodded agreement. We should document their response to being confronted with evidence. If they continue lying or refuse to make restitution, it will strengthen the criminal case. Tuesday morning, Eleanor called Donald and requested an immediate family meeting at her apartment. She told him only that she had learned some disturbing information about family financial matters and needed explanations from him and Patricia. Donald and Patricia arrived Tuesday evening, clearly expecting to control the conversation. They brought Grace with them, probably assuming they would face questions about wedding expenses rather than criminal fraud allegations. Eleanor took charge immediately, her voice carrying authority I had rarely heard from her. Donald, I want you to explain to me why family members have been giving you money, believing it would help Zane with medical expenses when that money was actually used for Grace's wedding preparations. Donald's confident expression faltered instantly. Mother, I don't know what you've been told, but there seems to be some misunderstanding about family financial arrangements. There's no misunderstanding. I have bank records, audio recordings, and witness testimony documenting systematic fraud spanning 18 months. Patricia jumped in with damage control. Eleanor, we've been trying to manage complex family financial needs while protecting everyone's privacy. Sometimes the details get complicated. Eleanor stood up and walked to her dining room table, which was still covered with evidence from our legal meeting. These are bank records showing that money I gave you for Zane's medical bills was transferred to Grace's wedding account. These are recordings of you discussing how to manipulate family members into giving money under false pretenses. She played one of Tyler's most damaging recordings where Patricia and Donald discussed maximizing family contribution potential by emphasizing Zane's ongoing medical financial crisis, while maintaining Grace's wedding fund growth. Grace went pale as her parents' voices filled the room with casual discussion of deceiving, caring family members. Donald and Patricia realized they were facing documented proof of criminal activity rather than family disagreements about financial priorities. These recordings also document your plans to forge Zane's signature and make him financially responsible for Grace's wedding expenses. Eleanor continued relentlessly. Identity theft, Donald. Criminal fraud. She handed him photocopies of the vendor contracts with my forged signature. Grace signed her brother's name to contracts totaling $47,000. They opened credit card accounts in his name without his knowledge or consent. Donald stared at the documents, his face cycling through shock, fear, and calculation. Mother, these are family financial matters that have been taken out of context. We've been trying to help both children navigate complex situations. You've been committing felonies, Eleanor replied coldly. Elder financial abuse, identity theft, and fraud. Uncle Robert's attorney friend has reviewed everything and confirmed multiple criminal charges. Patricia started crying, but they were tears of self-pity rather than remorse. We were just trying to make Grace's wedding beautiful and teach Zane about family responsibility. We never meant for things to become this complicated. Grace finally spoke, her voice small and defensive. I didn't know signing Zane's name was illegal. I thought family members could handle financial arrangements for each other. Tyler stepped forward with a transcript of her recorded conversations. Grace, this is you talking to Bradley about how everyone thinks they're helping poor Zane, while you knew the money was going to your wedding. You knew exactly what was happening. The room fell silent except for Patricia's sobbing. Donald was studying the legal documents, probably calculating his options and potential consequences. Eleanor delivered the ultimatum Marcus had suggested. You have 1 week to make full restitution to every person you defrauded, close all accounts opened in Zane's name, and cancel all contracts with his forged signature. You will also pay all legal fees and credit restoration costs. And if we refuse, Donald asked. Robert stepped forward. Criminal charges will be filed immediately. The district attorney's office has been notified and is prepared to prosecute financial elder abuse and identity theft to the full extent of the law. Donald and Patricia exchanged a look that communicated volumes about their relationship dynamics and decision-making processes. Grace was crying harder, finally understanding the potential consequences of her actions. We need time to consult with our own attorney, Donald said finally. You have 72 hours, Eleanor replied. After that, the decision will be made for you. They left Eleanor's apartment that evening without apologies or acknowledgments of wrongdoing. Their primary concern seemed to be minimizing consequences rather than taking responsibility for the systematic financial abuse they had inflicted on their family. Wednesday morning, Bradley called to inform us that his family's attorney had notified all wedding vendors about the fraudulent contracts. The venue caterer, photographer, and florist were canceling their agreements and pursuing collection from Donald and Patricia as the actual responsible parties. The wedding is officially canceled, Bradley told Tyler. My family cannot proceed with any arrangement involving criminal financial activity. Grace and I are also ending our engagement. Thursday. Grace showed up at my apartment unannounced, looking devastated and desperate. She had been crying for what looked like hours. Her engagement ring was missing from her finger, and she seemed to have aged years in just a few days. Zane, please, can we talk? Everything is falling apart, and I need you to understand what happened. Against my better judgment, I let her in and listened to her explanation. She painted herself as a victim of our parents' manipulation, claiming she had been pressured into participating in their financial schemes, and didn't understand the legal implications of forging signatures or opening accounts in my name. I was just so focused on having the perfect wedding that I didn't think clearly about how everything was being funded, she said through tears. Mom and Dad convinced me that family financial arrangements were normal and that everyone would work together to make my wedding beautiful. I looked at this person who had been willing to destroy my financial future for her celebration, wondering if she was capable of genuine remorse or just trying to avoid consequences. Grace, you heard the recordings. You knew family members were being lied to about where their money was going. You knew I was struggling with medical debt while you collected money intended to help me. I know it sounds bad, but I really believed the wedding was more important because it was a once-in-a-lifetime celebration. Medical bills are just temporary financial problems, but marriage is forever. Even in her supposed apology, Grace could not acknowledge that my life-threatening medical emergency was more important than her party. Her fundamental values were so distorted that she genuinely believed luxury wedding expenses justified criminal fraud. What do you want from me, Grace? I want you to talk to Uncle Robert and Eleanor about not pressing charges. If this goes to court, my entire future will be ruined. Bradley's already left me, and now I might go to prison for trying to have a nice wedding. I stared at her, realizing she still didn't understand the scope of what she had done. In her mind, this was about punishment for trying to have a nice wedding, rather than consequences for criminal financial abuse. Grace, you forged my signature and opened credit accounts in my name. You participated in defrauding elderly family members who wanted to help me during a medical crisis. This isn't about wedding planning, it's about criminal fraud. She left my apartment that evening without receiving the support she had hoped for. The little sister I had grown up with was essentially gone, replaced by someone whose moral compass was so broken that she viewed criminal fraud as reasonable wedding planning. Friday morning, Donald called with their attorney's response they would make partial restitution and accept responsibility for financial mismanagement, but they maintained that criminal charges were excessive for what they characterized as family financial disputes. Marcus reviewed their counterproposal and shook his head. Partial restitution and denial of criminal intent means they haven't learned anything and would probably repeat similar behavior in different circumstances. Eleanor made the final decision that Friday afternoon. File the criminal charges. If Donald and Patricia had shown genuine remorse and taken full responsibility, I might have considered family resolution. But their response shows they view this as a negotiating situation rather than criminal behavior that hurt people they claim to love. Monday morning, Robert accompanied me to the district attorney's office to file formal criminal complaints. The prosecutor assigned to our case reviewed the evidence and confirmed that the charges would likely result in felony convictions for all three defendants. The next phase would be arrests, arraignments, and a legal process that would determine whether my parents and sister faced prison sentences for their systematic financial abuse of their own family members. The criminal case moved through the legal system with surprising efficiency, largely because the evidence was overwhelming, and the defendant's attorney advised them to accept plea bargain arrangements rather than risk trial convictions that could result in maximum sentences. Tyler proved to be the prosecution's most valuable witness. His audio recordings, photographed documents, and detailed timeline provided irrefutable proof of premeditated financial fraud. More importantly, his testimony established that the criminal behavior was systematic and calculated, rather than impulsive or accidental. The preliminary hearings revealed additional evidence that prosecutors discovered through their investigation. Donald and Patricia had been filing false tax returns for 2 years, underreporting business income while claiming inflated medical expense deductions for my surgery costs they never actually paid. Grace's case was complicated by her engagement to Bradley and the wedding planning context, but her recorded statements about knowingly deceiving family members eliminated any possibility of claiming ignorance about the fraud. In November, 18 months after my original surgery, all three defendants accepted plea agreements that included criminal convictions and comprehensive restitution requirements. Donald received 2 years probation, community service, and financial monitoring for elder financial abuse and identity theft. Patricia received similar terms with additional requirements for financial literacy counseling. Grace received 1 year probation with mandatory therapy focusing on ethical decision-making and personal responsibility. The restitution order was comprehensive and immediate. Every family member who had been defrauded received full repayment within 30 days. The fraudulent credit accounts opened in my name were closed and resolved with no impact on my credit score. All vendor contracts with forged signatures were canceled with full penalty payments handled by Donald and Patricia. Most significantly for me, the restitution included complete payment of my outstanding medical debt. The $24,000 I had struggled to pay over 18 months was covered entirely by the court-ordered restitution plus interest and legal fees. Tyler moved in with me permanently after the legal proceedings concluded. The stress of testifying against our parents had strengthened our relationship while showing him clearly that his financial independence was essential for his long-term security. I keep thinking about how different my life could have been if I hadn't started recording their conversations. Tyler told me one evening while we were cooking dinner in my apartment. I could have ended up just like Grace, thinking criminal fraud was normal family behavior. Tyler changed his college major from business to social work, inspired by witnessing how financial abuse destroys family relationships and wanting to help other people recognize and escape similar situations. His coursework in family systems and financial literacy gave him tools for understanding the dysfunction he had documented in our own family. The recordings don't just prove they committed crimes, he explained during one of our many conversations about family dynamics. They show how people can rationalize obviously wrong behavior by focusing on their own wants instead of considering how their actions hurt others. The extended family rebuilding process was gradual but healing. Eleanor became the unofficial coordinator for family gatherings that excluded Donald, Patricia, and Grace, but included everyone else who had been deceived or hurt by their financial manipulation. Uncle Robert and Aunt Sarah organized a family financial literacy workshop, teaching younger family members about recognizing financial manipulation and protecting themselves from fraud. The workshop was partly educational and partly therapeutic, helping everyone process the betrayal they had experienced. Grandmother Eleanor surprised everyone by becoming an advocate for elder financial abuse awareness in her senior community. She began speaking to other residents about recognizing family financial manipulation and established a support group for seniors who had experienced financial abuse from relatives. I realized that staying quiet about what Donald did might enable him to hurt other people. She explained to a local newspaper reporter who wrote about her advocacy work. Family members who steal from elderly relatives count on shame and silence to avoid consequences. The impact on Grace was devastating, but potentially transformative. Losing Bradley, facing criminal conviction, and being estranged from most of her extended family forced her to confront the consequences of her choices for the first time in her life. She entered therapy as part of her probation requirements and gradually began reaching out to family members with genuine apologies. Her letters to Eleanor and the family members she had helped defraud showed what seemed like authentic remorse and understanding of the harm she had caused. I spent years believing that I deserved whatever I wanted and that other people should sacrifice to give it to me, Grace wrote in a letter to Eleanor. I never considered that Zane almost died or that family members were making real financial sacrifices because they thought they were helping him recover. Grace also wrote to me acknowledging the full scope of her participation in the financial fraud and apologizing for the casual cruelty she had shown toward my medical emergency. While our relationship remained strained, her letter suggested she was finally developing empathy and personal accountability. I understand now that opening credit accounts in your name was identity theft, not family financial planning. I understand that taking money intended for your medical bills was theft, not wedding budgeting. I understand that my dream wedding was built on criminal activity that hurt people I claimed to love. Whether Grace's apparent transformation was genuine or strategic would only be proven by her long-term behavior and choices. But the accountability process had at least forced her to acknowledge reality instead of living in the fantasy world our parents had created for her. Donald and Patricia's response to the legal consequences was less encouraging. They completed their probation requirements and made the court-ordered restitution payments, but they showed no signs of genuine remorse or behavioral change. They moved to a different state after the legal proceedings concluded, claiming they needed a fresh start away from family members who had turned against them. Their narrative portrayed themselves as victims of ingratitude and legal overreach rather than perpetrators of systematic financial abuse. The restraining orders included in their plea agreements prevented them from contacting me or Tyler directly, which was a relief rather than a loss. The people who had raised us were essentially gone, replaced by individuals whose moral and emotional dysfunction made healthy relationships impossible. My own life transformation was dramatic and positive. Without the crushing burden of medical debt, I could finally focus on career growth and personal relationships. The promotions I received at work were partly due to improved performance after resolving the family stress that had consumed my mental and emotional energy. I started dating Sarah, a colleague in my development team who had supported me throughout the legal proceedings. Our relationship was built on honesty, mutual respect, and financial transparency that felt revolutionary after years of family manipulation and deception. I love that you insist on splitting dinner cost and sharing financial information openly. Sarah told me during one of our early conversations about relationship expectations. It shows you value equality and honesty more than traditional gender roles or financial control. Sarah and I moved in together 8 months after the legal case concluded. Our shared apartment became the setting for regular dinners with Tyler, Eleanor, Uncle Robert, and other family members who had chosen truth and accountability over loyalty to criminals. These gatherings felt like genuine family celebrations because they were based on mutual care and respect, rather than financial obligations or emotional manipulation. People attended because they enjoyed each other's company, not because they were expected to provide financial support or submit to authority figures. The medical crisis that had nearly destroyed my life ultimately revealed the difference between authentic family relationships and toxic financial arrangements disguised as love. The people who genuinely cared about me had proven their loyalty by supporting truth and justice even when it was difficult and painful. Eleanor summarized the family transformation during one of our dinners. We lost 3 family members to their own criminal behavior, but we discovered which relationships were real and which were based on manipulation. The family we have now is smaller, but healthier. Tyler graduated from college debt-free, partly because his financial aid applications accurately reflected his family situation after Donald and Patricia were no longer claiming him as a dependent. His career in social work began with volunteer counseling for families experiencing financial abuse, work that drew directly from his experience documenting and exposing our parents' criminal behavior. My own career continued advancing as I gained confidence and focus that had been impossible while struggling with medical debt and family manipulation. The promotion to senior developer came with a substantial salary increase that allowed me to build a real emergency fund and start saving for long-term goals. More importantly, I learned to recognize healthy versus unhealthy relationship patterns in all areas of my life. The experience of fighting back against family financial abuse taught me that authentic love supports people during crises, rather than exploiting them, and that standing up to manipulation strengthens genuine relationships while exposing false ones. The legal victory was satisfying, but the personal growth was transformative. I learned that protecting my boundaries and demanding honesty actually improved my relationships with people who shared those values, while revealing the true character of people who viewed manipulation as normal family behavior. 2 years after my emergency surgery, I hosted Thanksgiving dinner for the family members who had chosen truth and accountability. Tyler, Eleanor, Uncle Robert, Aunt Sarah, and Sarah gathered around my dining room table for a meal based on gratitude rather than financial obligations. During dinner, Eleanor proposed a toast that captured the essence of what we had all learned: to recognizing the difference between family bonds and family manipulation, to choosing difficult truth over comfortable lies, and to discovering that real love supports people during their worst moments instead of exploiting them. As I looked around the table at people who had proven their loyalty through actions rather than demands, I realized that the medical emergency that nearly destroyed my life had ultimately led to the healthiest family relationships I had ever experienced. The people sitting with me had shown up during my crisis, fought for truth when it was painful, and chosen integrity over convenience. They represented genuine family values, mutual support, honest communication, and love that strengthens during difficult times rather than disappearing when circumstances become challenging. My parents and Grace had taught me what family relationships should never be conditional love based on financial compliance manipulation disguised as caring and exploitation of trust for personal benefit. But the people who remained had shown me what authentic family love actually looks like: support during emergencies, commitment to truth even when it's difficult, and loyalty that exists without financial strings attached. The medical crisis that began this story had ended with the most important lesson of my life. Real family members show up when you need help, not when you have money to give them. Have you ever faced a situation where family members tried to manipulate you financially, especially during a personal crisis? How did you handle setting boundaries with people who claim their demands were based on love and loyalty? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more true stories about family dynamics, financial boundaries, and standing up to manipulation. Sharing this video helps other people recognize similar patterns in their own families and find courage to protect themselves from financial abuse. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that protecting your financial and emotional boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for building healthy relationships based on genuine care rather than manipulation. Here's to families built on mutual respect rather than financial control, and to the courage it takes to choose truth over comfortable lies.